Well, when you think of the Dark Ages, you usually picture dirty people. I mean, this is the time period where public bathrooms didn't exist and most people shared a single bed with other people. So it's not exactly hard to picture them being filthy. But the truth might surprise you. So let's take a look at 5 real facts about hygiene in the Dark Ages in France and England. Starting off our list today in 5th place, we have smelly hair. Now, back in the Dark Ages, nobody bathed very often. Matter of fact, the average person would only bathe maybe once every 3 weeks or so. And this would be more for cleaning up after an injury rather than for general cleanliness. With all that said, the one part of your body that they would wash was your hair. Back in the Dark Ages, people were pretty concerned with having clean hair. They believed that if your hair looked good, then it meant you were healthy and well taken care of. And the reason for this was because the scalp could tell you a lot about someone's health. If you had dandruff, it meant you had consumed something that disagreed with you. If your hair was greasy, that meant you weren't eating enough meat. And if your hair was limp or thin, that meant you needed to eat more eggs. Now, there are a few reasons why they focused so much on their hair. For starters, the rest of Europe wasn't bathing, so they at least washed their hair. And secondly, back in the Dark Ages, a balding epidemic was sweeping across Europe. And it's believed that over 50% of men were either balding or completely bald. Now, the reason behind this epidemic is unknown, but it's believed that maybe it was all the syphilis going around. Either way, people in the Dark Ages believed that if you had no hair, then it meant you were unhealthy. This is why they developed all sorts of strange concoctions to help combat losing your hair. And while most of these were useless, there was one drink that could help grow your hair back: blood. The recipe would call for the blood of a bull, which would be boiled with wine vinegar and then ground up into a paste. Then the paste would be applied to the scalp twice a day until your hair grew back. Also, if you did have hair, that was considered to be a sign of virility, along with many other things, such as bushy eyebrows, a big nose, and a large chin. During the Middle Ages, poodles would trim your eyebrows and shape them into cool designs. So having perfectly shaped eyebrows was a sign that you took care of yourself. And while you might think that sounds disgusting, there is actually some science behind it. See, studies have shown that if you pluck your eyebrows, it can actually make your face more attractive. This is because your eyebrows are a frame for your eyes, and if they're done right, it can bring more attention to them. In fact, studies have shown that women prefer the shape eyebrows. Maybe that's why during the Dark Ages, poodles would get paid extra to shape eyebrows into cool designs. Moving on to our 4th spot today, we have eye injuries. As I mentioned earlier, during the Dark Ages, barbers would do all sorts of things, like pull teeth, treat wounds, set broken bones, and even shape your eyebrows. This is actually how many people got injured, since the tools that barbers used weren't exactly clean. Back in the Dark Ages, they didn't have any sort of antiseptic, so as soon as you broke a bone or got a cut, you would get infected. And if that happened, you would need a barber to help lance the boil and drain it. Now, this was risky, because not only were the instruments dirty, but barware wouldn't always cut cleanly. This would leave your skin open to more infection. To make matters worse, doctors weren't much better. I mean, they recommended rubbing mercury on a wound to get rid of infection. So you might as well just go to the barber. But perhaps the worst part was that since there was no Novocaine or any sort of pain medication, everything hurt like hell. It's actually reported that people have died from botched eyebrow plucking jobs due to infection. And many people that went to the barber shop with a simple cut or scrape would end up dying. Luckily, though, there was one thing that you could do at home to prevent infection. If you got cut or scraped, you could cover it in honey, and it would stop the infection. That's right. You heard me correctly. Honey would stop an infection. And I know that probably sounds gross, but honey actually has some amazing healing properties. Not only does it keep infections out, but it can also speed up the healing process. On top of that, honey is a natural pain reliever. So if you scrape your knee, putting honey on it would not only stop an infection, but it would also feel better. Today, hospitals actually sell medical-grade honey, which is basically just honey that has been heated to kill off the pollen so that people don't have an allergic reaction. This medical-grade honey is then put on patients to relieve pain and to stop infection. So next time you fall down and scrape your knee, I recommend putting honey on it. Just make sure you buy medical-grade honey, otherwise you'll just attract bees. Moving on to our third point today, we have tooth cleaning. Back in the Dark Ages, people didn't visit the dentist very often unless they absolutely had to. I mean, back then, the only toothbrushes were made of twigs and the only toothpaste was a mixture of salt, sand, and ashes. So you can imagine that people preferred to avoid going to the dentist. But there was one good thing about this mixture of salt, sand, and ashes. Salt was great at killing bacteria, and that's the main ingredient in plaque. Plaque is what leads to gingivitis, which can lead to bad breath. So by brushing your teeth with salt, you would naturally get rid of bad breath. That's why back in the Dark Ages, the rich would have servants brush their teeth with salt water. But while salt could get rid of bad breath, it couldn't help your teeth. In fact, the salt would actually eat away at your tooth enamel, making your teeth more yellow. Now, there was a simple fix for this, and that was urine. Back in the Dark Ages, people would use urine to whiten their teeth. The acidity in the urine would help remove stains on your teeth. And while you might find that disgusting, there is some truth to it. Studies have shown that urine can be used to whiten teeth. Now, obviously, this isn't something that you should try at home, but dentists do use some of the ingredients found in urine to whiten teeth. Moving on to our second point today, we have baths. Even though people didn't bathe very often during the Dark Ages, they did bathe more often than you'd think. See, back in the Dark Ages, people would only bathe with a sponge on a stick, and these sponges would be used multiple times. I mean, back then, public baths were quite common, and while people would cover themselves in cold, dirty water, they would use a sponge to scrub their bodies. Then once they were covered in dirt and dead skin, they would wring out the sponge and use it on somebody else. So even though people didn't bathe very often, at least they tried to keep themselves somewhat clean. Now, that all changed when the Black Plague hit. After the plague, people stopped using public bathhouses because they were afraid that it would spread the disease. Then came the belief that bathing would make you sick. Now, even though this wasn't true, people avoided bathing for hundreds of years. In fact, there was even a law passed in the 1800s banning public baths. This law stayed on the books until the early 1900s. And this is the reason why so many people were filthy during the Dark Ages. I mean, if you never bathe, of course, you're going to be dirty. Finally, moving on to our number one spot today, we have rats. Back in the Dark Ages, rats ran rampant through the streets of France and England. There were just rats everywhere, and it's no wonder why. See, back then, garbage would just be thrown out into the streets and left there. These piles of garbage would attract stray animals, including rats. And with nowhere to run and hide from predators, the rats' population would boom. Now, as you can imagine, these rats would carry disease, and they would spread that disease through the garbage. I mean, they would eat your food and then drop dead in the street from the plague. So even though people didn't bathe, at least they could stay clean by avoiding the garbage in the streets. But unfortunately, there was another problem. Rats would carry fleas, and these fleas would also carry the plague. And this is how the plague would spread. So when you think about how dirty people were during the Dark Ages, just remember, it could have been a lot worse. All right, guys, that's our list for today. Let me know in the comments below what hygiene practice from the Dark Ages you would try at home. And while you're down there, make sure to smash that subscribe button. All right, everyone, thanks for watching. Hope you learned something new. And as always, don't forget John shot first.